Preventing workplace harassment.
Whether it's a road trip or a workplace, it helps to have guidance on the right direction to take. This course is intended to do just that for you. Everyone deserves to feel safe and respected at work. Whether you're in the physical workspace or working remotely, a safe and respectful work environment is one that is free from discrimination, harassment, and bullying. Each of us plays a role in shaping our organization's work culture every day through the things that we say and the actions we take. That's why we're counting on you to do your part in preventing workplace harassment and helping us build a positive and productive work environment. Our ultimate destination is a workplace that allows everyone to succeed.
Preventing workplace harassment. What is workplace harassment? Workplace harassment is a form of discrimination, and it includes offensive behavior based on certain characteristics protected by law. More specifically, it's unwelcome conduct that creates a work environment that's intimidating, hostile, or offensive. What is unwelcome conduct? Unwelcome means the victim didn't initiate or invite the behavior. Keep in mind, behavior that's acceptable to some may be unwelcome to others. Behavior that was once tolerated but is no longer acceptable can be considered unwelcome. What's considered harassment? Harassing behavior can be verbal, physical, written, or visual. Examples include offensive comments, remarks, or jokes, repeated pressure to participate in unwanted, inappropriate, or offensive activity, unwanted physical activity, unwelcome touching, pushing, or staring, displays of offensive pictures, cartoons, or materials, offensive materials sent over the internet. What isn't considered harassment? Although petty slights, annoyances, and isolated incidents, unless extremely severe, are likely improper in the workplace, that conduct isn't generally considered harassment. Common courtesies, such as holding the door for a coworker, also typically aren't considered harassment without other factors present. How might workplace harassment appear? The conduct doesn't have to be direct and obvious. It can be implied, indirect, or subtle. There doesn't have to be an intention to offend or harass. What matters is how the victim received or perceived the conduct. It's most often a pattern of behavior, but can also include extremely severe, isolated incidents. Who's protected? Our organization doesn't tolerate harassment against our employees or anyone we do business with. This includes contractors and subcontractors, vendors, consultants, and others providing services related to a contract, for example, a delivery person. Keep in mind, anyone who's affected by the conduct could potentially be a victim of harassment. The conduct doesn't need to be directed at that person to be considered harassment. This includes people who overhear or witness the behavior, such as employees sitting nearby. Harassment prevention, the legal framework. There are combinations of state, federal, and local laws that protect against harassment. Together, these laws and regulations prohibit discrimination based on certain categories. These vary depending on each jurisdiction, but typically include personal characteristics such as race or color, religion, ancestry or national origin, sex including pregnancy and medical conditions resulting from pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, age, physical or mental disability. Some jurisdictions prohibit discrimination based on additional categories such as veteran or military status, marital status, family status, and domestic violence victim status. Our organization is committed to not only complying with all laws, but also doing what's right to create a work environment where everyone feels safe and respected. Unconscious bias. Recognizing, navigating, and challenging unconscious biases can help lead to a more equitable workplace free from harassment and discrimination. What are unconscious biases? Unconscious biases, also referred to as implicit biases, are biases or prejudices people have but aren't aware of. Unconscious biases are shortcuts our brains use to process and make sense of information. Everyone brings unconscious biases to the workplace. Those biases can be based on things like sex, race, age, religion, disability status, and marital or parental status, as well as various other personal traits, characteristics, and attributes. For example, an employee may unknowingly make assumptions about coworkers based on things like the color of their hair or how they dress. Challenging unconscious biases. Biases become a problem when we act on them to someone's disadvantage or use them to make unfair or unethical decisions. Recognizing and challenging biases starts with each of us. It's not always easy, and it can sometimes be uncomfortable. That's okay. Examining and overcoming our unconscious biases is a key part of building a more positive and productive work environment. Bullying and abusive conduct. What is bullying? Bullying is any repeated intentional behavior that degrades, humiliates, embarrasses, or otherwise undermines an employee's performance. While bullying or abusive conduct isn't based on protected characteristics and therefore doesn't rise to the level of discrimination, it's nevertheless unacceptable in our workplace. Bullying behavior creates an unsafe work environment, and if left unchecked, the conduct will often become more severe over time. Examples of bullying behavior: shouting at someone, name-calling or making belittling or disrespectful comments about someone, whether in private or in front of others, excessively monitoring, criticizing, or nitpicking someone's work, deliberately overloading someone with work or undermining their work, purposely withholding information needed to perform a job efficiently, actively excluding someone from the normal workplace conversations. What isn't considered bullying? A single act is generally not considered bullying unless it's severe and egregious. Reasonable actions made by an employer or supervisor that relate to managing employees or the workplace are usually not considered bullying. Benefits, consequences, and remedies. There are many benefits to having a harassment-free culture. By contrast, workplace harassment may lead to severe consequences for the victim, the harasser, and our organization. Because victims of workplace harassment may suffer severe consequences, there are laws and regulations in place that may provide remedies. Benefits of preventing harassment, discrimination, and bullying can include increased morale and productivity, the ability to attract and maintain top talent, and a reputation as an ethical business partner. Consequences to the victim. This might vary widely depending on the situation, but victims of harassment can suffer serious effects, including mental and emotional distress, career damage or disruption, and higher stress levels. While some people who have experienced harassment may call themselves victims, others may refer to themselves as survivors or use other words. Potential remedies for victims. Examples include reinstatement of employment if the victim was fired, back pay for missed work, compensatory damages including damages to cover emotional distress, punitive damages to punish parties who engaged in or tolerated harassment, and corrective action against the harasser. Consequences a harasser might face. Depending on the severity of the behavior, a harasser could be subject to things like career and reputation damage, disciplinary action up to and including termination, civil or criminal penalties which could result in costly fines and legal fees, and additional legal action if their conduct qualifies as other offenses like assault or invasion of privacy. Consequences for the organization. Organizations that don't actively seek to prevent and address harassment may suffer from costly legal penalties, lowered productivity, damaged reputation, and employee discontent as well as decreased morale. Types of harassment. We value our employees' unique backgrounds, experiences, and contributions, and strive to create an inclusive work environment where everyone feels respected. You can help in this effort by avoiding and preventing harassment, familiarizing yourself with different forms of prohibited behavior, and treating others courteously. Keep in mind, harassment can involve various types of behavior or be based on multiple characteristics. For example, an employee could experience both racial and religious harassment. Racial harassment. Racial harassment is a form of race discrimination and includes discriminatory conduct based on beliefs about a person's race and the physical characteristics associated with a person's race, such as skin color, hair texture, or hairstyle, or facial features. Racial harassment can take numerous forms, including derogatory name-calling and racist slurs, insults, or threats, bigoted or hateful statements directed against a particular race, racially themed jokes, displays of racist graffiti, images, or insignia, racially motivated violence, religious and national origin harassment. Our organization doesn't tolerate harassment or offensive behavior against employees because of their religious beliefs and practices or their ethnicity, ancestry, or national origin. It's unlawful to discriminate against a person because of their affiliation with a particular religious, ethnic, or tribal group, physical, cultural, or linguistic characteristics associated with a particular religious group or ethnic group, including clothing, language, accents, or social customs, their marriage to or association with someone in a religious or ethnic group, their attendance at or participation in churches, temples, mosques, or other religious institutions, a name that's associated with a particular religious or ethnic group, or a perception that a person is of a particular ethnicity or national origin. Examples of harassment based on religion and national origin. Religious and national origin harassment can occur in a variety of ways, such as expressing defamatory, bigoted, or hateful views of people of specific religious or ethnic backgrounds, voicing stereotypes about a particular religious or ethnic group's abilities or traits, engaging in degrading or derogatory name-calling, including religious or ethnic slurs, threatening deportation or making derogatory comments about immigration status, making jokes pointed at immigrant, ethnic, or religious groups, mocking an employee's accent or language, putting pressure on employees to change their religious or cultural practices, religious beliefs or affiliations, or food or clothing preferences, forcing employees to participate or not participate in religious activities as a condition of employment, imposing more or different work on an employee because of their ethnicity or religious beliefs or practices, and in extreme cases, physical abuse, violence, and vandalism. Age and disability. Age-based discrimination and harassment. Our organization prohibits harassment and discrimination against people based on age. This can include making repeated jokes or comments about a person's actual or estimated age or associated characteristics like their sight, hearing, or technological capabilities. Disability-related harassment. State and federal laws prohibit workplace harassment or discrimination against a person with an actual or perceived disability. Generally, a disability is considered an impairment that hinders major life activities. Examples of disabilities: chronic debilitating illness, mental illness, and limitations with sight, speech, hearing, or mobility. Examples of disability-related harassment: derogatory comments or remarks, unfair treatment, practical jokes, interfering with implements or devices that aid an individual's impairment, and overbearing or abusive behavior. What is accommodation? Depending on the situation, an employer may be required to provide reasonable accommodation for an employee based on certain protected characteristics, such as an employee's religion, disability, including pregnancy and related medical conditions, lactation needs, and family status. A reasonable accommodation includes things like a modification to the physical environment, work schedule, or job duties. It must be made for qualifying employees as long as it doesn't alter the essential functions of the job or cause the employer undue hardship, such as by impeding business operations or violating health and safety laws. Examples: Specific examples include a worker stipulating that they cannot work on a certain day of the week in connection with religious observances. An employee with a disability that causes excessive fatigue requesting to take a longer break or sit down while they work. Accommodation is an interactive process. If you make an accommodation request, you should do so in accordance with our policy, which may include engaging in an interactive process to determine if an accommodation can be found. The interactive process can involve meeting with your manager and other internal parties, such as human resources personnel, to determine your needs and exploring multiple adjustment options that will preserve the essential functions of your role. Consequences. An employer that refuses to engage in an interactive accommodation process with these employees or provide the requested accommodations could be liable for discrimination unless they can show undue hardship. Two of the most common areas in which employers must engage with employees for accommodation are religion and disability, which can encompass pregnancy-related medical conditions. Employers may also have a duty to provide lactation-related accommodations. Sexual harassment. What is sexual harassment? Sexual harassment is a particular type of sex-based harassment or discrimination that is illegal under federal, state, and local laws. It's generally considered any unwanted sexual conduct, including advances and comments, that's offensive to the recipient or interferes with their job performance. Conduct that's sexual in nature. Conduct that's of a sexual nature doesn't have to be direct and obvious. It can be implied, indirect, or subtle. The behavior can also be physical, verbal, or written. Although sexual harassment is most often a pattern of unwelcome behavior, it can also include extremely severe, isolated incidents. Examples of sexual conduct: inappropriate, intentional touching up to and including violence, repeatedly leering at someone's body, telling lewd jokes or engaging in sexual pranks, making sexual comments or innuendos, displaying sexually oriented pictures. What's not considered sexual harassment? Sincere gestures of courtesy aren't considered sexual harassment. These can include polite compliments that don't offend the recipient or holding the door open for someone. Forms of sexual harassment. In order to recognize sexual harassment, it can be helpful to understand some of the forms it might take, specifically hostile work environment harassment and quid pro quo harassment. Hostile work environment harassment. Hostile work environment harassment is intimidating, hostile, or degrading behavior that causes offense or humiliation. It's caused by unwelcome or unwanted conduct that makes an employee feel uncomfortable, and it's most often created by a pattern of behavior or repeated instances. Traditionally, the conduct must be considered severe or pervasive enough to alter the victim's conditions of employment and to create an abusive work environment. But certain states, like New York, have started moving away from requiring conduct to be severe or pervasive. A hostile work environment based on sexual harassment can be created by sexually offensive remarks or jokes, repeated pressure for dates, unwelcome physical activity or intimidating behavior, display, distribution, or presence of sexually explicit or offensive materials. Quid pro quo harassment. Quid pro quo harassment, sometimes called abuse of authority or power harassment, occurs when a supervisor or someone in a position of power abuses that power to make sexual demands and then promises, threatens, or imposes consequences based on the employee's willingness to comply. Unlike hostile work environment harassment, it's far more common for a single, isolated instance of improper conduct to form the basis of a legitimate claim of quid pro quo harassment. Quid pro quo actions can include hiring and firing, promotion, failure to promote, or demotion, reassignment to an unwanted or undesirable position, reduction in benefits like health insurance or retirement savings matching, and refusal to approve requests for time off. Other types of improper harassment or sex discrimination. Our organization doesn't permit anyone to be mistreated or treated differently based on sex. Examples of sex-based discrimination include excluding men or women from meetings, making statements that demean men or women in general, posting images or materials that insult or make fun of men or women. Pregnancy. Pregnancy discrimination can include refusing to promote or assign clients to a pregnant employee, and reassigning a woman who recently returned from a pregnancy-related leave to less desirable work. This may be based on the assumption that she will be distracted or less dedicated. Sexual orientation. This type of harassment or discrimination may include repeatedly referring to a person's sexual orientation, making offensive comments about a person's sexual orientation, or expressing negative attitudes towards people of different sexual orientations in general. Gender identity or expression. Harassment based on gender identity or expression may include treating someone differently because they don't conform with gender stereotypes or other people's perceptions about how individuals of a certain sex should act or look. For example, a woman who doesn't dress how women should or typically dress. Persistently using the incorrect pronoun for a person who is asked to be identified a certain way. For example, continuing to call a transgender male coworker she when the coworker has asked to be called he. And making comments about which bathroom a person uses. More on gender identity, gender expression, and transgender status. Offensive conduct based on a person's gender identity, gender expression, or transgender status is prohibited in our workplace. Although exact definitions of these terms may differ by location, here are some general definitions. Gender identity. Gender identity refers to a person's identification as male, female, transgender, etc. A person's gender identity may differ from their sex at birth. For example, a person born male may identify as female. Gender expression. Gender expression describes a person's gender-related appearance or behavior, whether or not it's stereotypically associated with the person's sex at birth. Transgender. Transgender is a general term that refers to a person whose gender identity differs from their sex at birth. A transgender person may or may not have a gender expression that is different from the social expectations of their sex at birth. Gender transition. Gender transition refers to the process by which some people strive to more closely align their gender identity and outward appearance. Some people socially transition. They might begin dressing in a manner typically associated with another gender, using names and pronouns associated with another gender, or asking to be socially recognized as another gender. Others undergo physical transitions in which they modify their bodies through medical intervention. Who might be a harasser? Some common misconceptions about harassers. Harassment only occurs from a supervisor to staff. Only men are harassers. Only heterosexual people are harassers. Harassers only harass people of the opposite sex. Essentially, it's common to think that the only workplace harassment scenario is a straight male manager harassing a straight female employee. But harassers don't conform to stereotypes. In fact, a harasser can be someone who's not in a position of direct authority over the alleged victim, like a coworker or a subordinate. Women can also be harassers. Harassment can occur regardless of the party's sexual orientations. Harassment can take place between members of the same sex. Harassers don't have to be employees. This type of behavior might be exhibited by vendors, suppliers, customers, visitors, and building staff members. Employees never have to tolerate harassment simply because the harasser is a customer, a client, or another third party. Where and when workplace harassment might take place. Workplace harassment can happen in locations other than the actual workplace and outside of work hours. Harassment can occur at off-site, after-hours functions, including office parties or social gatherings, even if they occur outside of the office, out-of-town meetings or trainings, trade shows, conventions and conferences, and online as well as over social media. See something, say something. If you believe you or another employee is experiencing harassment in the workplace, don't ignore it. Immediately report the conduct to an appropriate internal resource, such as your manager or our organization's other internal reporting channels. Why it's important to report. The sooner our organization knows about a potential problem, the sooner we can address it. By reporting the incident promptly, our organization can take action to stop the behavior immediately and prevent it from occurring again. You're protecting yourself and other employees who may have experienced harassment. Making a report. Employees may make a complaint to their supervisor or to any appropriate resource, such as a human resources manager, the legal department, another supervisor, a complaint hotline, or an ombudsperson. While not required, it can be helpful to provide documented examples of the conduct. This could include saving emails or text messages and keeping notes with dates, times, and witnesses to the conduct. Ensuring your concerns are addressed. If the resource to whom you initially report ignores or minimizes your complaint or otherwise fails to adequately address your concerns, escalate your issue to the next level according to our internal policy. Investigations. Our organization will investigate claims of improper conduct as laid out in our policy. The investigation may include a review of the relevant documents and evidence, as well as interviews with involved parties and witnesses. All investigations are kept confidential to the extent possible, and you will be notified of the final determination. Stepping up, bystander intervention. Being an active bystander involves preventing or stopping workplace harassment that you see or hear about. You can be an active bystander by being aware of your surroundings, recognizing harassing behavior, and intervening safely. Intervening safely. You can intervene safely by asking the victim if they're okay, attempting to defuse the situation in a way that doesn't put you or others in danger, distracting the harasser by talking about something unrelated, communicating to the harasser that their behavior is unwelcome and must stop, removing the victim from the situation, and notifying an appropriate internal resource. Protecting those who do what's right. Our commitment to non-retaliation. Our organization doesn't permit retaliation or deliberate negative actions against anyone who reports improper behavior in good faith. What is good faith reporting? Good faith means that even if you don't have absolute proof, you honestly believe that your report may be true and that it requires further investigation. Protected activities. We don't permit retaliation against employees for doing any of the following: making or filing a complaint or report, opposing discrimination, assisting another employee who is complaining of harassment, or providing information during a workplace investigation. These activities are protected from retaliation even if the ultimate determination is that no discrimination or harassment took place. What might retaliation look like? Examples of retaliation can include firing or demoting an employee, giving them the most undesirable tasks at work, a sudden work schedule or location change, an unwarranted negative reference after the employee has left, or any conduct that could have the effect of discouraging a reasonable worker from making a complaint about harassment or discrimination. If you experience retaliation for reporting a policy violation or concern, report it immediately. If the retaliatory conduct is coming from the person to whom you originally reported, report it to a different internal resource.